The phone rang at 3 in the morning with that shrill sound that can only mean emergency or tragedy. I picked up the receiver with trembling hands, expecting news of a hospitalized relative or car accident. Instead, I heard the voice of the executive director of the company where my wife works. "Jordan, you deserve better than Amanda," said Victoria Blackwood, her voice carrying an intimacy inappropriate for someone who barely knew me. "She's here in my office right now, completely drunk, telling me about her adventures with other men. You really should know the truth about who you married." "My name is Jordan Mitchell, I'm 34 years old, and I work as a cybersecurity analyst for a consulting firm specializing in corporate data protection. During 10 years of marriage to Amanda, I've learned to read people and situations with the same precision I use to identify vulnerabilities in digital systems. And at that moment, every professional instinct I possessed was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with that call. Amanda was supposedly at a marketing conference in Chicago, a 3-day event that her company sponsored annually. She had called me 6 hours earlier, around 9 o'clock at night, saying she was exhausted after the lectures and planned to go to bed early. Her voice sounded normal, maybe a little tired, but definitely sober and affectionate. She wished me good night and said she loved me, as she always did when she traveled for work. "Where exactly are you?" I asked, keeping my voice controlled as my mind began to process the inconsistencies of the situation. "At my office in Manhattan," Victoria replied with that condescending tone I recognized from the few times I had met her at company events. "She showed up here an hour ago, completely drunk, wanting to vent about your extramarital affairs. She said you're a boring and predictable husband who never satisfied her properly. Honestly, Jordan, I thought you should know before others find out." The timeline didn't make any sense. Chicago was 800 miles from Manhattan. Even if Amanda had left immediately after our call, it would take at least 8 hours by car or 2 hours by plane plus travel time to get to Victoria's office. And why on earth would the office be open at 3 in the morning? Why would Victoria be there at that hour? Why would Amanda go there instead of just going home? "Can I talk to her?" I asked, already knowing what the answer would be. "She just left for the bathroom," Victoria said quickly. "Look, Jordan, I know this is painful, but as the executive responsible for maintaining ethical standards at the company, I felt I had a duty to inform you. Amanda has been problematic lately. She arrives late, leaves early, spends a lot of time on the phone talking quietly. Behavior that suggests personal instability." I remained silent for a few seconds, processing not only her words, but the tone, the cadence, the specific choice of each phrase. Victoria was constructing a very elaborate narrative for something that was supposed to have happened spontaneously. She was planting specific details about Amanda's professional behavior, creating an image of instability that would justify future actions. "Thank you for letting me know," I finally said. "I'll call Amanda directly." "Jordan, wait," Victoria said, and for the first time her voice lost that overconfidence. "Maybe you should process this before you confront her. Decisions made in the heat of the moment are rarely the best ones. Why don't we all sleep on it and talk tomorrow with a clearer head?" I hung up without responding and immediately dialed Amanda's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy and confused. "Jordan? What time is it? Is everything okay?" In the background, I could clearly hear the distinctive hum of hotel air conditioning and distant Chicago traffic. There were no office sounds, no other people's voices, definitely no indication that she was in Manhattan. "Where exactly are you right now?" I asked. "In my hotel room, sleeping." "Jordan, you're scaring me. What happened?" I quickly explained about Victoria's call. Amanda was completely stunned. "That's absolutely impossible," she said, her voice growing stronger as her indignation grew. "I've been in Chicago for 2 days, I haven't left the hotel since I got back from the lectures tonight. And why would Victoria be at the office at 3 in the morning? Why would she have my personal number? Jordan, something is very wrong." As Amanda spoke, my analytical mind began to piece together a more sinister picture. Victoria had made that call for a specific purpose. She wasn't trying to help me or inform me of inappropriate behavior. She was testing something, gauging my reaction, planting seeds of distrust in my marriage. But why? If you're following this story of corporate manipulation and suspect there's much more behind this strange call, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple attempt to destroy a marriage would reveal a much more dangerous scheme. As I reassured Amanda and promised to investigate the situation, a cold certainty settled in my mind. Victoria Blackwood had made a crucial mistake in underestimating me. She didn't know that my professional specialty involved detecting and neutralizing threats that masquerade as normal situations. And now that she had put me in her sights, she would find out exactly why companies pay exorbitant amounts for my protection services. The next morning, I decided to investigate Victoria Blackwood using the same methodology I used to analyze vulnerabilities in corporate systems. If she was trying to manipulate my perception of Amanda, I needed to understand her motivations and identify the weaknesses in her strategy. Victoria had been the CEO of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions for 3 years, a medium-sized company specializing in digital campaigns for technology startups. Amanda worked as a senior account manager, a position she had held since before Victoria took over. At the few corporate events I attended, I noticed that Victoria maintained an impeccable professional demeanor, but always showed excessive interest in her employees' personal details. I started by reviewing Victoria's professional social media accounts. Her LinkedIn profile showed an impressive track record: an MBA from Wharton, stints at renowned consulting firms, awards for female leadership in technology. But something bothered me about the timeline of her previous positions. Each change of company coincided with periods of only 18 to 24 months, a pattern inconsistent with organic career growth. Delving deeper into my research using public monitoring tools that I use professionally, I discovered something interesting. Victoria had sued her previous company for gender discrimination, claiming that a male colleague received a promotion that should have been hers. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but court records showed that she had presented evidence of alleged intimate conversations between colleagues as proof of a hostile work environment. The pattern was forming. Victoria collected personal information from colleagues and used it strategically when necessary. Her call to me was not an act of a good Samaritan concerned about a marriage in crisis. It was a calculated move to plant specific information and gauge my reaction. I called Amanda during her lunch break in Chicago. "Jordan, I'm still upset about this situation," she said immediately. "I talked to some colleagues here at the conference and discreetly asked about Victoria. No one has my personal phone number except Human Resources and you. How did she get it?" This information confirmed my suspicion. Victoria had accessed HR files without authorization to obtain Amanda's number, which constituted a violation of corporate privacy policies. But it raised an even more disturbing question. Why did she need my number specifically? "Amanda, I need you to think carefully about any recent interactions with Victoria. Private meetings, casual conversations, situations where she showed personal interest in our married life." Amanda was silent for a few seconds before responding. "Now that you mention it, about 3 weeks ago, Victoria called me in for a conversation about career development. It was strange because she asked a lot of questions about my family plans, whether we were thinking about having children, how you supported my career. At the time, I thought it was genuine interest, but now it seems like an interrogation." Another piece of the puzzle. Victoria was gathering information about the dynamics of our relationship, looking for vulnerabilities she could exploit. But I still hadn't identified her ultimate goal. During lunch, I decided to pay an unannounced visit to the Pinnacle office. Since Amanda was traveling, I had a plausible excuse to deliver some personal documents she had forgotten. At the reception desk, I asked to speak to Victoria, explaining that I was the husband of an employee. Victoria appeared 5 minutes later, impeccably dressed in a gray blazer that probably cost more than my weekly salary. Her expression showed a split second of surprise before she regained the professional smile I recognized from the night before. "Jordan, what a pleasant surprise. How can I help you?" "I wanted to thank you personally for calling me last night," I said, carefully observing her micro-expressions. "It must have been a very uncomfortable situation for you." Her smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "Of course, it was my duty to inform you. I hope you were able to talk and clear everything up." "Oh yes." Amanda explained everything perfectly, including where she was exactly when you said she was in your office. Victoria blinked twice quickly, an involuntary sign of processing conflicting information. She had realized that I knew her story was false, but she still didn't fully understand what that meant. Sometimes, when people are under emotional stress, they can get confused about specific details, she said, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Absolutely," I agreed, keeping my tone friendly. "Stress can definitely affect one's perception of reality. Fortunately, I work with systems that automatically record everything. Locations, timestamps, communications. It removes the possibility of human confusion. I let the implied threat hang in the air between us. Victoria was smart enough to understand that I wasn't just talking about corporate systems. "Well, I'm glad everything has been cleared up," she said, her voice slightly more tense. "If there's nothing else." "Actually, there is one thing. Amanda mentioned that you had an interesting conversation about career development recently. She was very impressed with your genuine interest in her professional growth." Victoria nodded cautiously. "I'm considering surprising her with a celebration when she returns from the conference. Perhaps you could help me by suggesting something she would truly value professionally." It was a simple trap. If Victoria truly cared about Amanda's development, she would provide helpful suggestions. If her motivations were elsewhere, she would try to discourage any celebration that would strengthen our relationship. "Honestly, Jordan, I think Amanda is going through a period of personal questioning. Maybe it's best to give her space to process her feelings before making any grand gestures." Perfect. Victoria had revealed her true agenda. She didn't want me to strengthen my relationship with Amanda. She wanted me to remain insecure, suspicious, emotionally distant. "Interesting perspective," I said, mentally cataloging this information. "Well, I'll let you get back to work. Thanks again for caring about our situation." I left the Pinnacle office with a much clearer understanding of the situation. Victoria wasn't trying to save my marriage or protect me from an unfaithful wife. She was deliberately trying to destroy my trust in Amanda, possibly to create an opportunity for herself or simply out of personal malice. But she had made a fundamental mistake in underestimating me. She assumed I would react emotionally, that I would be devastated by the possibility of betrayal and act impulsively. Instead, my analytical response had exposed her lies and revealed her true intentions. Now that I understood the real nature of the threat, I could begin to formulate an appropriate response. Did Victoria want to play mind games with my marriage? She would find out that she had chosen the wrong opponent. Someone who dedicated their professional life to identifying and neutralizing hidden threats would not be manipulated by her amateurish performance. As I drove back to the office, my mind was already organizing a plan. If Victoria thought she could use false information to destroy relationships, she would soon learn how true information could be even more devastating. And unlike her, I had the resources, skills, and patience to ensure that my response would be permanent. Victoria wasted no time in escalating her campaign of destruction. The following Monday, Amanda called me from work, her voice visibly shaken. "Jordan, something very strange is going on here." Victoria called me into a meeting with Human Resources. They said they received an anonymous complaint about my inappropriate professional behavior, allegedly involving conflicts with colleagues and punctuality issues. I felt a cold anger rising within me. Victoria was using her position to fabricate a dossier of disciplinary issues against Amanda, creating a paper trail that would justify future punitive actions. What exactly did they allege? I asked, already activating my laptop to begin documenting everything. 3 specific incidents in the last 2 months. An argument with Jennifer from design about deadlines, which never happened. A 45-minute delay one morning when I had car trouble, which was duly justified. And allegedly using inappropriate language in a team meeting, which is completely untrue. Each allegation was carefully constructed, events that could have happened, but distorted or fabricated. Victoria was creating a narrative of a problem employee that she could use to justify termination for cause, eliminating any right to severance pay or unemployment insurance. How did HR react when you contested the allegations? They said they would take everything into consideration, but that they were obliged to open a formal disciplinary process. Victoria was present throughout the meeting, with an expression of professional concern that made me nauseous. She pretended to be on my side, saying she hoped it was all a misunderstanding. I hung up and immediately called my friend Kevin, who worked as a legal consultant specializing in labor law. We had known each other since college, where he had specialized in cases of workplace bullying and corporate retaliation. "Kevin, I need a consultation. A situation involving a superior fabricating disciplinary offenses." "Jordan, you know these cases are extremely difficult to prove, especially when the perpetrator has access to HR systems and can manipulate documentation. What if I could prove that the motivations were personal? demonstrate a pattern of behavior directed specifically against my wife after she refused inappropriate advances. Kevin was silent for a few seconds. That would completely change the nature of the case. It would have elements of sexual harassment, retaliation, and possibly defamation. But we would need solid evidence, not just circumstantial. I explained the situation with a fabricated call and my visit to Victoria's office. Kevin was intrigued. "Do you have a recording of the original call?" "No, but I can prove Amanda was in Chicago through hotel records, airline tickets, and multiple witnesses. And I have detailed logs of all subsequent communications." "Interesting. And you said your specialty is cybersecurity? What kind of systems do you typically audit?" "Mainly corporate infrastructure. Emails, internal communications, human resources systems. I identify vulnerabilities and traces of unauthorized access." The pause on the other end of the line was significant. "Jordan, I want to be very clear about something. I cannot and will not advise you to do anything that violates privacy laws or unauthorized access to systems. But if you discover evidence of illegal activity through completely legal means, that would be extremely valuable for an employment case." I understood perfectly. Kevin wasn't authorizing me to hack into Pinnacle systems, but he was informing me of the evidentiary value of legitimately obtained evidence. That afternoon, Amanda called me again, this time genuinely frightened. "Jordan, Victoria sent me a text message. On my personal phone." "What did she say?" "That it would be best for everyone if I considered looking for new professional opportunities. That the atmosphere in the office was getting tense and maybe it was time to move on. She ended by saying she would be happy to provide a positive recommendation if I left voluntarily." Victoria had escalated from manufacturing infractions to outright intimidation. She was offering a friendly exit before implementing the forced resignation she had orchestrated through the disciplinary process. "Amanda, did you save that message?" "Yes, but Jordan, I'm considering accepting her offer. Maybe it's better to leave now with a recommendation than wait to be fired for fabricated issues." I felt something solidify inside me. Victoria had miscalculated again. She assumed she could use intimidation to force a quick resolution, that Amanda would simply resign to avoid further conflict. But by sending that message, she had created documented evidence of retaliation directly connected to the fabricated disciplinary allegations. "Amanda, don't make any decisions today. Victoria is betting that you will react emotionally, that you will choose the way out that seems easiest. But she made a mistake by documenting her true intentions in writing." After reassuring Amanda, I called Kevin again. "The situation has escalated. We now have written evidence of an offer of voluntary resignation immediately following the creation of fabricated disciplinary infractions. This establishes a causal link between retaliation and an attempt to force resignation. This is gold, Jordan. But we still need the original motive for the retaliation. If you can show that it all started with a fabricated phone call." That's when I made my decision. Victoria had turned this into corporate warfare, using institutional resources to attack my family. She was betting that we were easy targets, that we didn't have the knowledge or resources to defend ourselves properly. She had made two fatal assumptions. First, that I wouldn't have access to the tools necessary to document her actions. Second, that even if I uncovered her lies, I wouldn't be able to prove a systematic pattern of predatory behavior. Both assumptions were about to prove dramatically incorrect. That night, while Amanda slept, I spent 3 hours reviewing my professional connections, identifying available resources, and formulating a response strategy. Did Victoria want to play by corporate rules? She would find out she had picked the wrong opponent. My specialty was not just detecting vulnerabilities in security systems. It was thoroughly mapping the information architecture of entire organizations, identifying all access points, and creating forensic reports that would withstand the most rigorous legal scrutiny. Victoria had spent years building her reputation as an ethical and competent executive. Her arrogance had blinded her to a fundamental truth: reputations built through manipulation and intimidation are, by definition, vulnerable to exposure of the truth. And I was about to become the expert at revealing exactly those truths. While Victoria slept comfortably, convinced that she had successfully intimidated yet another victim into silence, I was methodically cataloging every mistake she had made, every digital trail she had left behind, every vulnerability in her carefully constructed professional armor. The real battle was just beginning. And this time, it would be fought on ground where I had every advantage. The next morning, I began my investigation using completely legal resources available through my consulting firm. As a security audit specialist, I had access to public corporate databases, intellectual property records, and social media analysis tools that most people don't even know exist. I started by mapping out the entire organizational structure of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions. Through LinkedIn, I identified all current and former employees, their professional connections, and staffing patterns over the past 5 years. What I found was revealing. Victoria had implemented an extremely high turnover system in the department where Amanda worked. In the 3 years of her tenure, 17 people had left the company, a turnover rate 400% above the industry average. More importantly, 8 of those departures were married women in Amanda's age group, all fired for performance issues that suddenly arose after years of positive reviews. Delving deeper into public labor lawsuit records, I discovered that 3 former employees had attempted to contest their dismissals. All of them dropped their lawsuits after out-of-court settlements that included strict non-disclosure clauses. Victoria was using corporate resources to systematically silence any resistance to her predatory behavior. I called the office of a former college classmate, Marcus Chun, who now worked as a consultant specializing in digital forensics. I explained that I needed to document a case of corporate bullying using only public sources and legitimately obtained information. "Jordan, do you realize what you're suggesting?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying professional concern. "If this executive has the track record you describe, she's probably protected by extremely competent corporate lawyers. That's why I need everything to be flawless. Documentation that will withstand the most rigorous legal scrutiny. Evidence that tells a story so clear that no lawyer will be able to distort it." Marcus agreed to help me, especially after I explained how Victoria was using intimidation tactics against vulnerable employees. We spent 2 hours reviewing evidence collection methodologies, identifying sources of information that would be admissible in court proceedings. While I was organizing my investigation strategy, Amanda called me in a panic from work. "Jordan, Victoria has escalated everything." She called me in for another meeting with HR, this time presenting a witness who claims to have heard me speaking ill of clients in public. It's a complete lie, but they have a signed statement. I felt cold anger run down my spine. Victoria was fabricating witnesses now, likely coercing other employees into signing false statements under threat of similar retaliation. Who was the witness? Jennifer from the design department. She looked terrified throughout the meeting, could barely look me in the eye. "Jordan, I think Victoria is forcing people to lie about me." This information completely changed my approach. If Victoria was coercing employees into providing false testimony, she wasn't just committing workplace bullying. She was orchestrating a conspiracy to fabricate evidence, a federal violation that could result in criminal charges. That afternoon, I implemented the first phase of my plan. Using digital communication analysis tools, I began mapping Pinnacle's corporate email patterns. Through public metadata and available routing information, I identified anomalous activity times that suggested communications outside of official channels. Victoria was sending emails to specific employees every Thursday after 5 p.m., when IT oversight was minimal. The recipients were consistently people in precarious positions, employees on probation, those with recent below-average evaluations, single mothers who were critically dependent on their jobs. The pattern was clear. She identified vulnerable people and contacted them when they would be most susceptible to pressure. While documenting these findings, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer, the employee who had provided false testimony against Amanda. "Can I meet you in person?" she asked, her voice whispered and nervous. "I can't talk about this on the phone." Victoria said she monitors all employee communications. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe after work. Jennifer arrived looking exhausted, constantly looking over her shoulder as if she expected to be followed. "She forced me to sign that statement," Jennifer confessed immediately. "She said if I didn't cooperate, she would find reasons to fire me. I have 2 young children, Jordan. I can't lose this job." "What exactly did she ask you to sign?" "A statement saying that I heard Amanda speaking ill of clients out loud. But that never happened. Amanda has always been professional and respectful." Victoria gave me a specific script of what to write. Jennifer was trembling as she spoke. I asked her permission to record our conversation, and she consented, desperate to document the truth before Victoria discovered her confession. Has she done this to other people? At least 4 that I know of. They all received the same ultimatum: cooperate with her false investigations or face dismissal for fabricated issues. Now I had direct evidence of criminal conspiracy. Victoria wasn't just harassing Amanda individually. She was operating a systematic scheme of coercion involving multiple employees and the deliberate fabrication of false evidence. If you're following this revelation of how a corrupt executive was manipulating an entire corporate system for her own ends, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the strategy one developed to expose this entire scheme will be unlike anything you've ever seen. That night, I spent 4 hours putting together a complete dossier. 17 former employees with identical patterns of sudden dismissal. 3 attempts at legal action silenced through settlements. For current employees coerced into providing false testimony. Evidence of coercive communication through unmonitored channels. But I needed more than documentation. I needed a strategy that would ensure Victoria couldn't simply fire Amanda and continue her scheme with other victims. I needed something that would expose not only her crimes, but also the corporate structures that allowed her to operate with impunity. The solution came to me during a routine consultation with a client whose system had suffered a data breach. As I explained how leaks of sensitive information could be prevented, I realized that Pinnacle's problem wasn't that information was leaking. It was that crucial information was being deliberately concealed. Pinnacle's board of directors was unaware of the pattern of anomalous dismissals. Investors were unaware of the legal risks Victoria was creating. The legal department had not been informed of the multiple attempts at litigation. Victoria operated by creating information silos, ensuring that no one in a position of real authority could see the full picture of her activities. But compartmentalization works both ways. If I could gather all the fragmented information into one comprehensive report and deliver it simultaneously to all interested parties. On Friday morning, Amanda called me in utter despair. "Jordan, they fired me." Victoria said the disciplinary process revealed an unsustainable pattern of behavioral issues. "I have 2 hours to clear my desk and leave the building." It was at that moment that I realized I had reached the point of no return. Victoria had escalated to immediate termination, betting that Amanda would simply accept defeat and disappear quietly. She didn't realize that every aggressive action only strengthened the case I was building against her. "Amanda, don't sign anything today. Don't accept any settlement. Don't agree to any statement about the reasons for your dismissal. Just say you need to consult a lawyer before finalizing anything." "But Jordan, they're saying that if I don't cooperate, they won't provide positive references. It will ruin my career." "Trust me." Victoria made a fatal mistake by rushing the timeline. Now she's exposed in a way she can no longer control. While comforting Amanda, my mind was already implementing the final phase of the plan. Victoria had just provided the conclusive evidence of retaliation I needed. Immediate dismissal following directly on Amanda's refusal to accept voluntary resignation established an unquestionable causal link. Now it was no longer a question of whether I could expose Victoria. It was a question of how completely her career and reputation would be destroyed when the truth finally came out. And unlike her previous victims, who had been silenced through intimidation and legal settlements, she had chosen the wrong opponent. Someone who dedicated their professional life to tracking hidden threats would not be neutralized by obvious threats. And Victoria was about to find out exactly why companies paid exorbitant amounts for my protection services. The game was over. She just didn't know it yet. On the Monday following Amanda's resignation, I implemented the first phase of my response. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I simultaneously sent a complete forensic report to 12 specific people: the Pinnacle Board of Directors, the Corporate Legal Department, 3 journalists specializing in corporate misconduct, 2 external auditors who had worked with the company the previous year, and the lawyers representing the former employees in the lawsuits previously silenced by settlements. The report was 63 pages of meticulous documentation. A complete timeline of the 17 anomalous dismissals during Victoria's tenure. Statistical analysis demonstrating that the turnover rate in Amanda's department was 300% higher than the industry average. Photographic evidence of coercive communication patterns. A recording of Jennifer's confession about being coerced into providing false testimony. Most importantly, she had included a legal risk analysis demonstrating how Victoria's systematic behavior exposed Pinnacle to potential civil liability of at least $2 million in damages, not counting litigation costs and reputational damage. At 9:15 a.m., Victoria's phone rang. It was Pinnacle's CEO, requesting an emergency meeting for 10 a.m. At 9:45, the corporate legal department called demanding that she bring all files related to the recent dismissals. At 9:52, the first journalist published an article online titled, "Pinnacle Marketing Executive Accused of Systematic Pattern of Moral Harassment." At 10:05, Victoria called me. "Jordan, we need to talk immediately." Her voice had completely lost that corporate confidence I remembered. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you don't understand the consequences of what you've done." "Victoria, I'm in my office. You're welcome to come here if you want to discuss the evidence I've documented about your behavior over the last 3 years." "Evidence? You hacked into private systems, violated corporate confidentiality. That's a federal crime, Jordan. I can have you arrested." I smiled, even though I knew she couldn't see me. Victoria still didn't understand that every action she had taken against Amanda and other employees had been documented through completely legal and court-admissible sources. "Victoria, be here in an hour. Bring your lawyer if you want. But I recommend you come, because in 2 hours I'll be doing a live interview with Channel 7 News about patterns of corporate misconduct, and I'd rather you have the opportunity to hear exactly what will be discussed." Victoria arrived 45 minutes later, accompanied by a corporate lawyer who seemed as confident as she had sounded on the phone. They entered my office as if they were arriving to negotiate terms of surrender from a defeated opponent. "Jordan, let's get a few things straight," the lawyer began before even sitting down. "My client is prepared to sue you for defamation, invasion of privacy, and malicious interference in business relations. The allegations in your report are baseless and potentially criminal." I opened my laptop and turned the screen so they could both see it. On the screen was a detailed chart showing the 17 dismissals during Victoria's tenure, with dates, circumstances, and preceding communication patterns. "Attorney Williams, correct?" I said, checking the information Marcus had gathered about him. "Corporate law specialist, Harvard graduate, 15 years of experience defending executives. Impressive resume." Williams nodded cautiously, clearly wondering how I had obtained his professional information. "Then you surely recognize that every piece of evidence in this report was obtained through public sources, accessible court records, or voluntary witness statements. Nothing that violated privacy, nothing that constituted unauthorized access." I clicked to the next screen, showing the transcribed recording of Jennifer's confession. This recording was made with the full consent of the declarant, who voluntarily sought to document coercion she suffered to provide false testimony. Coercion which, as you are surely aware, constitutes obstruction of justice under federal law. Victoria had gone completely pale, but she tried to maintain her aggressive posture. "Jordan, you're destroying an entire company because of a misunderstanding about your wife's dismissal. Amanda was fired for legitimate performance issues." "Victoria, let's review exactly what happened with Amanda, chronologically." I opened a new presentation that I had prepared specifically for this meeting. "First week of September, you call me at 3 a.m. with a fabricated story about Amanda being drunk in your Manhattan office, when she was demonstrably in Chicago. Second week of September, you initiate disciplinary proceedings based on false allegations, using coerced witnesses. Third week, you offer voluntary resignation via intimidating text message. Fourth week, when Amanda refuses, you push for immediate dismissal." I clicked to the next screen. Now let's look at the pattern over the last 3 years. Sarah Martinez, fired in March last year after refusing your advances during a business trip. Jennifer Walsh, fired in August after questioning your hiring practices. Rebecca Thompson, fired in December after reporting inappropriate behavior to HR. For each name, there were photographs, documents, detailed timelines. Victoria was watching her entire career being dismantled with surgical precision. 17 women, Victoria. 17 marriages destroyed or damaged. 17 careers cut short because you used your position to attack people who couldn't defend themselves. Williams tried to intervene, "Mr. Mitchell, even if these allegations were true." "They're not allegations," I interrupted. "They're documented facts. And there's more." I opened the final folder in the presentation. Victoria made a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a sigh when she saw what was on the screen. Your non-disclosure agreements with former employees were voided when the pattern of systematic behavior was established. The 3 women you silenced through legal intimidation have broken their agreements and provided full depositions. The State Labor Department is launching a criminal investigation. The Pinnacle Board of Directors is voting on your immediate dismissal at this very moment. Victoria finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whisper. What do you want? Justice, I replied simply. You spent years using corporate structures to silence victims and protect your ability to continue causing harm. Now those same structures are being used to ensure that you never again have authority over vulnerable people. My phone vibrated with a text message. It was from Marcus. Board has voted. Unanimous dismissal. Security is being called to escort her from the building. I showed the message to Victoria and Williams. Victoria, you have approximately 15 minutes before Pinnacle Security arrives to escort you from the building. I recommend you use that time to consider how you want to respond to the press waiting at the exit. Williams was frantically taking notes, probably calculating damage control strategies. Victoria was in silent shock, finally understanding that there was no legal or corporate way out to escape the consequences of years of predatory behavior. There's one thing you still don't understand, I said, closing my laptop. This isn't about personal revenge for Amanda's dismissal. It's about stopping a pattern that has continued for years because no one had the resources or courage to fully document its extent. Victoria rose slowly, as if each movement required conscious effort. The 17 women you harmed now have lawyers. Lawyers who are working pro bono because they believe patterns of systematic abuse must be exposed. The civil case will be public, complete, and permanent. When they left my office, Victoria looked like she had aged a decade in an hour. Williams was on the phone, probably trying to organize public relations strategies to minimize damage that was already irreversible. My phone rang again. It was Amanda. Jordan, I can't believe what's happening. Jennifer called me in tears, saying she can finally tell the truth. The whole company is talking about investigations and firings. What did you do? As I explained to Amanda how I had turned Victoria's lies into evidence that exposed her entire scheme, I felt something that wasn't satisfaction or revenge. It was the quiet clarity of having used my professional skills to restore balance to a system that had been corrupted for too long. Victoria had bet that she could manipulate and intimidate people indefinitely, protected by corporate structures and legal agreements. She discovered that some people have enough resources and determination to document entire patterns of misconduct and expose them in a way that no amount of institutional power can contain. But as Amanda celebrated and the news spread across social media, I knew the story was not over yet. Victoria had not yet fully grasped the true extent of the consequences she would face. And when that happened, her attempts to control the damage would reveal even more sinister aspects of how she had operated for years. 6 months later, I was sitting in the federal courtroom when the judge handed down the final sentence against Victoria Blackwood. 3 years in prison for conspiracy to obstruct justice, plus 5 years of probation. The judge's gavel echoed like a final period on years of impunity. Victoria had tried every strategy her expensive lawyers could come up with. They claimed persecution, defamation, conspiracy against a successful executive. But 63 pages of meticulous documentation and testimony from 17 victims created a wall of evidence that no rhetoric could tear down. Amanda sat beside me, finally at peace after months of anxiety. Pinnacle had offered her a substantial settlement and her job back with a promotion. She turned down both, preferring the position of Director of Corporate Ethics at a startup that valued integrity above all else. "You've become a different person during this process," Amanda told me as we left the courthouse. "More determined, more focused. As if you've found your true purpose." She was right. I discovered that my expertise in detecting digital vulnerabilities translated perfectly to identifying systemic corruption. In recent months, 3 companies had hired me specifically to audit their corporate cultures and identify patterns of abuse of power. Jennifer, the employee Victoria had coerced, called me the week before. "Jordan, I wanted you to know that I finally slept through the night. For the first time in 2 years, I don't wake up afraid to go to work. Thank you for proving that people like Victoria aren't untouchable." The impact spread beyond Pinnacle. The case gained national coverage, inspiring legislative changes on corporate bullying. 5 other companies implemented stricter policies after seeing the legal consequences Victoria faced. Marcus continued working with me, expanding our services to include corporate misconduct investigations. We developed a protocol that other victims of systematic harassment could use to properly document their cases. 3 weeks ago, Victoria tried to contact me from prison. A handwritten letter asking for forgiveness, claiming she finally understood the harm she had caused. I didn't respond. Some people deserve second chances. Others need to learn that actions have permanent consequences. The most valuable lesson I learned was not about revenge or justice, but about the importance of using our skills to protect the vulnerable. Victoria operated for years because people were afraid to confront her or lacked the resources to properly document her behavior. Now, when I receive calls from concerned spouses or intimidated employees, I know exactly how to turn suspicions into irrefutable evidence. How to convert fear into strategic action. How to ensure that corporate predators face real consequences instead of simply moving to another company. Amanda and I moved into a new house last fall. No memories of lies or betrayals, just clean space to build something honest. We planted a garden together, a not-so-subtle metaphor for growing good things in soil that was once toxic. In my desk drawer, I keep a photo from the first meeting of our support group for victims of corporate harassment. 17 women who refused to remain silent, turning traumatic experiences into systemic change. Victoria thought she could manipulate my marriage with a deceitful phone call at 3 in the morning. Instead, she triggered an investigation that exposed years of predatory behavior and inspired reforms that will protect countless future employees. If this story of how an attempt at manipulation turned into complete justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel for more real stories of people who refused to accept injustice and turned adversity into positive change. The last I heard from Victoria, she was working in the prison library, organizing law books for other inmates. Perhaps she is finally learning about true justice. As for me, I'm helping to write new chapters in this story, one investigation at a time.